Before we read the first email, let's do a parenthetical aside. We've talked about this before. The world would be entirely different if before every interaction, before every time we opened our mouths, before every time we did something, we were to say to ourselves, I choose to be loving. I choose. Not because the other person's loving, not because the other person gave me something. I choose to be loving because, let me think, I can. Because I can choose to be loving. Because I have love to give. Because love always works better. Always. Because if I'm loving, I'll be happy. And so will other people, almost invariably. Occasionally, you'll really annoy people by being loving, but that's not the rule. I choose to be loving because it's just fun. And if we were to ask ourselves, before we spoke or did anything else, what would it be like if I were loving? And how would that change the world around me? Do I want to add love to this particular situation or interaction? Or do I want to add fear? Anger is the fuel of every conflict, while love is the seed of joy. So, do I choose to add fuel to the fire or plant the seeds of life? These questions are just so important that from time to time we have to be reminded of them. If we have to write them down, if we have to tattoo them on the inside of our eyelids, it's worth it. It really makes a difference to be more aware of where we are and what choices are available. Love is always a choice, especially if we've been loved and we've seen love. This first letter is from Mother, who has been raising two girls in real love from birth. Imagine this. I talk to people all day long about how to, I hate the word fix, but how to repair the damage that was done by, first years and years and years of enabling and whining and crying and manipulating and anger and all that stuff. Much harder. These two girls have been raised, imperfections and all. The mother certainly didn't do this perfectly. She wouldn't begin to claim to. She's raised these kids from birth with love. And she writes and says, I just have to tell you about how these sisters are doing. Eve is 1.5 years old. And Zoe is 4.5. The relationship between them is amazing. They have a bunk bed, and every morning Eve wakes up, that's the 1.5-year-old, plays for a little bit, and then climbs up to Zoe's level, who's 4.5, snuggles with her for a bit, and then she gets ready all on her own, the 4.5-year-old, for school. She gets dressed, she brushes her teeth and her hair, she practices the piano. This is all before going to school. Since I learned to play the piano as a little kid, I happen to know how much work that is. And I'm just incredibly impressed that a kid would do this without complaining, without being told to. I must admit that on more than one occasion I grumbled about it when I was a kid. So she gets all ready for school, and then they come downstairs together holding hands. Sometimes Zoe tries to get Eve ready and will brush her teeth and hair, which works out sometimes. She tried once to change Eve's diaper, and that didn't work out so well. Turns out 4.5-year-olds aren't particularly equipped to change diapers. This is the priceless stuff you just can't manufacture in your head. You can't pay for it. You can't just make it happen by hoping for it. It happens as a result of making hundreds and hundreds of consecutive, consistent decisions to be loving and teaching as a parent. You want to know what the end result is of being a loving parent? This, and it's worth every step that it took. The mom continues, we've all been taking turns getting sick this weekend. How thoughtful. And Zoe has basically been taking care of us, the 4-year-old. She gets Eve food out of the refrigerator, calms Eve down when she's screaming because she doesn't really know how to talk yet, and invents games to play with her. She invents games to play with her sister. I don't remember inventing games to play with my brother, for example. She calms her down when she's screaming because she doesn't know how to talk. She invents games. She even taught Eve how to use watercolors. She gets out the paint and the water and everything and shows Eve how to use it, and then cleans it up when they're all done. Now we're at the place where I'm only half believing this story, but I do know it's true. So she cleans it all up. I've never asked her to do any of this. This is where it becomes just sweeter than candy. These girls interact and behave this way with each other and for each other without being told to do it. Why? Because they have a loving example at home. That's why. I've had parents tell me it's impossible for children to behave like this. Apparently not. Because these two kids do it. The mom continues, it also makes me so glad that I don't let them watch TV much. I was thinking of putting some on today since we're all sick, but before I could, Zoe had started playing a game with Eve, which she was making up, and the baby dolls, rocking them in a rocking chair and making up a song and so on. This would change the world if parents dared to make it go viral. Really. We go on YouTube and a thing will go viral because it's really cute. Imagine something going viral because it really makes kids happy. One of the reasons it doesn't do that is most of us don't recognize what happy is. We think cute is as close as it comes, or exciting, or entertaining, or humorous, or whatever. This is life-changing. So imagine what the world would be like. Mom concludes by saying, of course, it's not perfect. Zoe really dislikes sharing many things with Eve, like things that she owns. But who cares? It's inconvenient since most of the toys are Zoe's. She's the older child, so naturally she has more toys. But their relationship is so heavenly, it just doesn't matter. It makes me just sigh. This is what you get when you love a child. This is the same kid who in a recent video chat I mentioned reached over and touched her mother when her mother was talking to her husband and being a little sharp, and said to her, I think you're being mean to Daddy. This is not how wives behave to their husbands. You teach your kids the principles of real love early enough, they become the standard. Love becomes normal, and your kids will remind you when you're not living up to normal. When you get to that place, it isn't work to be happy anymore. Happy is just the way it is. It takes work to be snotty. Pretty impressive story. And I know the family, so I know it's not made up. Next email. Actually, this is a quote that I was reading in a magazine the other day. Can't remember why I was reading a magazine, but this person said, everyone you meet always asks if you have a career, if you're married, if you own a house, blah, 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 as if life was some kind of grocery list. Have you done this and this and this? And how can we assess you on how you look and what you make and so on? And he says, but nobody ever asks if you are happy. Nobody ever asks if you are happy. This is philosophical genius. Who wrote it? Nietzsche? Kierkegaard? The philosopher was Heath Ledger. This is the actor who was really pretty spectacular as the Joker in one of the Batmans, and as the oldest son in the movie The Patriot. He was really quite an actor. He had it all in the eyes of the world. Had all the drugs and women and cars and houses, and adored everywhere he went. And he was so miserable that he used drugs for his emotional pain and eventually killed himself. Why? He said it himself. Nobody ever asks if you're happy. When people looked at him, all they saw was his accomplishments. All they saw was what he could possibly do for them. Could he further their career? Could he give them money? Could he give them an opportunity? Nobody ever asked him if he was happy. And because nobody ever asked him, he ended up dead. And the same thing happened to Robin Williams. And the list goes on and on and on. People who have everything except the one thing that makes us alive, truly alive, emotionally alive, feeling loved. These are pretty heart-stopping examples of what creates happiness in life. New subject. Sometimes I will say to people, listen slowly. And I do that because what I'm essentially announcing is what I'm about to say is really important, really especially important for you. I say it so they'll pay attention. Mostly people express themselves poorly and with too many words. We use, oh, goodness. I used to keep track of this. I don't anymore. Try it sometimes. See how many words it takes somebody to express a thing that could have been expressed in a single sentence. Because people use so many words, the people around them tend not to listen. On the whole, we don't listen well to people because of, one, their fears, and two, their lack of saying what they mean because they're afraid. When people are afraid, they protect themselves. They don't express themselves. See the difference? They don't make a choice. When people are afraid, they protect. They don't express who they really are at all. In fact, we can't express who we really are until we feel safe, until we feel loved enough. So, on the whole, people don't express themselves. They just protect and get. So, what I'm suggesting is do that sometime. Try it out. Touch your partner and say something like, I'm not telling you exactly what to say, it's none of my business to do that, but say something like, listen slowly. This is important to me, what I'm about to say. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just telling you something that is important to me. Are you in a place where you can give me your full attention? Most people have gotten to the place where they just exchange meaningless words endlessly and they never communicate anything. Or one of them one of them talks endlessly and the other one has just withdrawn and shut up, 10 years ago, and the speaker never noticed. A conversation has really no use at all unless The person who's speaking is expressing something about themselves, not just protecting themselves. And the person who's listening is actually listening instead of listening fearfully and protecting themselves. Try this sometime when you want to really be heard. Listen slowly. Are you in a place where you can give me your full attention? Sounds little. It's not. Most people have never had this experience in their entire lives. How do I know? Because I've asked thousands of people if they've ever had this experience, and they haven't. Thousands of people. It's a pretty rare event. New subject. I know a man who works in sales, and he pushed a woman to buy something, which salesmen often do. After all, they're usually paid by commission, many of them anyway. And so they have a tendency to be a little pushy. Actually, they're kind of famous for it. He pushed her too hard. He could see that she was uncomfortable at his pushing her to buy this product, which was moderately expensive. And her daughter, who was there, finally spoke up and told him to stop and go away. He had to get up and leave the person's house because the daughter ordered him away because he was causing so much pressure to her mother. And then he felt bad about it later. He felt bad as a person that he had pressured her so much that her daughter had to throw him out. Waste of time and energy to feel bad about it. While you're feeling bad, you can't feel peaceful or loving. And everything that you think becomes distorted by your fear and your pain. Everything becomes distorted. It's all painted with the "I'm a bad person" brush, which was handed to you when you were an infant, pretty much fully formed. Yuck. What's the alternative? Let go of the "I'm a bad person" brush and just learn from every experience that you have, even the ones that are distinctly counterproductive, the ones that are unloving, the ones where you're pushing. Don't waste your time feeling bad about them. Learn from them. Similar situation. Woman was dating, and she was all excited about a guy, and she worries, same theme as the previous subject, she feels bad that it might be all imitation with this guy. She worries that she texts too much or too little. We can't accomplish anything meaningful, anything that's meaningful and positive, as long as we're worried, because worry is just a synonym for fear. So what's the alternative? Stop. Stop. Think. Be aware. Just watch what you're doing. Learn from what you're doing. You will make mistakes. Dating, selling, talking, being a parent, trying to be a partner. You're going to make mistakes. My answer is, so what? Really? Sometimes people will call and say, just bawling their eyes out, I did this and this with my husband and my child. And if you let that go on to its natural conclusion, they can do that for an hour. Usually I interrupt them after like 2 minutes. And I say, so what? They say, did you not hear me? I was just a terrible parent and a terrible mother and a terrible wife and husband and blah, blah, blah. And I repeat again, so what? You did the best you knew with what you had at the time. I was in a group of people once where I said, I really tend to believe that people do the best they can with what they've got at the time. And he was pretty smug and judgmental. And he said, well, What about somebody who knows what the right thing is and says they're going to do the right thing, and then they just don't do it? That would have to be an example of somebody who is wrong and lazy and whatever, wicked, terrible. And I said, which of us knows enough about somebody else's DNA, epigenome, total life experience, especially the formative years where essentially you were established as who are you going to be for the rest of your life, family history, on and on. Who knows enough about another person to ever make the judgment that they should have done better? Including yourself, by the way. Most people don't know the first thing about themselves. People come here from all over the world every week. And I spend time counseling with them. And at some point, it's very common for me to say, you have absolutely no idea who you are. None. Why? Because the behaviors that you use to protect yourself and to get the temporary diminishing of pain that you have all of the time, or the praise or the power or the whatever, those behaviors are so common that you've come to believe that they're you. And they're not. So we have no idea what's going on with other people or ourselves. Complete waste of time to feel bad. Much more productive to be aware, because when we feel bad, we're less available to be loving. Feeling bad is, in fact, hang on to this because this is kind of a new thought. Feeling bad is really selfish. That's after a motivating moment. If you've done something terrible and made your child feel bad or your spouse feel awful, then go ahead and feel horrible for however many minutes it takes you, and then you're done. The purpose for feeling bad is simply to provide you the motivation to be less likely to do that again. That's it. Done. After that, feeling bad is just a complete waste of time, and in fact, will make you feel bad enough that you'll be more likely to do that again. Fear makes everything worse. New subject. I know a woman who has had disastrous relationships in the past. She's so eager not to be alone that she would do anything to keep someone, even if they were not only not loving, but also abusive, mean, selfish, dishonest, manipulative. She would put up with anything to not feel alone. Well, now she knows what it's like to feel loved. She knows what it feels like. From a parental figure, not a counselor, not a coach. She knows what it's like for a wise person as a parent to love her, and it has transformed her life. She waited for a good while before she started dating, and now she's beginning to date, so she's pretty smart to wait before dating to feel loved enough to be a worthwhile dating partner. We're always worthwhile people, really. Oh, we always are. We're doing our best. But most of us have no business dating. Different thing. Dating in the real love style, she writes, is like jumping into the water for the first time without those little floaty things on your arms that hold you up. You know how you see little kids in pools wearing these little floating things on their arms to keep them from drowning. And every time I see them, I go, boy, I hope they don't fall off, because it looks like they're just made to go zip off into the pool. She continues, you know deep down that you can swim now because you have real love, and you know how fun it's going to be but it feels unfamiliar. Yeah, no kidding. And that scares people initially because they can't use the manipulations they've always used in the past to get and maintain a relationship. Beauty, money, sex, people pleasing, and so on. As unproductive as those things always end up being, they do work in the short term. And in order to date the real love way, you have to give them up. Well, it makes you feel kind of naked for a while. It's like, what do I do? Because we don't even know who we are. In fact, that's how you find out who you are. Is to interact with people without manipulating and using them and lying to them and all that stuff that we've always done. She continues, I'm diving into intimacy with a man who doesn't provide me with the imitation love that I would usually require from a partner to feel safe. One example, he's shorter than what I would usually go for. So I keep hearing myself saying, nope, he doesn't physically meet the picture of the partner I had in mind. So 1, he will never fully meet my needs. See the corner she's painting herself into? And therefore, 2, I don't want to start to feel strongly about such a person. So here she's met somebody who's a potential partner, might be the most perfect partner she's ever met. In fact, I know a good deal more about their relationship now than when she wrote this letter. He's probably the best partner she's ever met, ever. And she was prepared to throw him out because he wasn't as tall as she pictured her knight in shining armor being. Being tall turns out doesn't make you more loving. So that was your old thinking, and look where it got you. Somebody needs to be tall, they need to look like this, they need to do these things. And it got you nowhere. I know you know this, but I'm just confirming it. Those old criteria, height, style of personality, wealth, whatever, simply didn't work. You continue. In other words, I'm afraid that his lack of 5 inches in height is going to leave me feeling empty. Old thinking. And you know that, but the old thinking never got you anywhere because you've dated guys who were exactly the height you wanted them to be. 6'4", 6 foot, really tall. And did you ever find a lasting relationship with any of those people, any of them, because they were tall? No, not one. Or you'd still be there in that relationship. You've never found one. We really have to adjust our expectations when we date in an unconditionally loving way. You conclude, I get to explore feeling intimate with somebody freely and fearlessly and see where it goes. Intimacy does not mean that I'm trapped. I can let myself feel close and intimate with him without needing him. Yeah, it's possible. So if I decide it's not for me, I can still leave happily and freely. Now, this is very wise, so I'm going to go over it about 100 times. You put yourself completely out there when you go dating in the real love way. You just expose yourself. And if the person who you expose yourself to responds in a lackluster, non-comprehending, kind of dull, brain-damaged way, pretty clearly that's not the person. Doesn't matter whether they're wealthy or tall or good-looking or have houses all over the world. None of that matters at all. If you expose yourself and they don't accept who you are, what have you lost? Nothing. So one person has seen you and doesn't particularly understand you. Next. That's the only sensible solution. Next. And you go and you find the next one. We have a real need for meaning, for purpose, for excitement. Once we feel loved, all that other stuff is just like dessert. It's fun, but not essential. Wealthy, tall, great looking, all that stuff, fun, but you don't need it. I know a man who's addicted to work and success, and he said, after real love, I realized that I don't need all that stuff, work and success. And he used to be a, no kidding, addict to those things. And he was very good at them. I can enjoy my work. I can enjoy my success, but I don't have to prove it. Brilliant. This world is so confused, so lost in their understanding of what love is and what happiness is, that it's difficult to find people who've ever even experienced happiness. So when you talk about the real thing, you talk about genuine love and real happiness, very often in a group of several hundred people, I look out over the room, there isn't but a handful of people who even have a clue that that's possible. And usually nobody who's actually experienced it. New subject. Somebody writes and talks about dating, much like the subject we just talked about. There's something I'm aware of that shows up every time when I'm dating. When I don't get a text message back within an allotted time, which only I know the answer to, in other words, how long should it be before I get a text back? I'm the only one who knows, and I make everybody guess what the correct amount of time is. I get fearful. So if it's too short, somebody writes back too short to my text, then I'm afraid that they're trying to get intimate too soon. If they write back with too long an interval between my text and theirs, then I'm afraid that they don't care about me. So I have this crazy standard set up such that pretty much everybody fails. It's actually pretty brilliant of you to notice. And it's because you hear the old message, you're not worth loving. And you hear it because people communicate to you when they respond too slowly, especially, that you're just not worth it. Or if they respond too quickly, you somehow twist it into they're going to use you, which means you're still not worth loving. If you can ignore that message, realizing that you don't need the love of that one person, then somebody taking extra long to respond to a text means absolutely nothing. I've heard this particular issue spoken 100 times, more than that. That people begin to date, they text the other person, and then they don't hear back within an hour. With some people, it's 2 hours. With some people, it's a day. It's a game everybody plays. It's just absurd. When you text somebody, it turns out that you're probably not the center of their universe yet. So you're just getting information. And you get more information and more information. And if you pay attention, if you already have sufficient real love from a wise person, then you won't set these stupid artificial standards up that my partner should respond to a text within X minutes. Instead, you just observe. You watch all of them. You watch whether they're sensitive. You watch whether they're willing to learn. You watch whether they're willing to be truthful. And as you begin to explore a relationship with this person, you might say things like, I feel more loved when I send a text and I get a response within, the next couple of hours. Or if you were to say to me, I'll be unavailable to answer texts at all for the next 6 hours. I'm just getting to know you. I'm just getting a feel for who you are. And because of old rejections, not your fault, I tend to judge myself as unlovable when you don't respond quickly enough. Wow, hear how different this is? As opposed to what people usually do, which is, well, you didn't respond to me for 2 hours, and then they proceed to cut the person into little pieces. Well, it's the end of that relationship. Or worse, it's not the end of the relationship, and the person that you just cut to pieces says, oh, well, I'll try to do better, and tries to meet your standard for the rest of your life, and now you've got a captive instead of a partner. Don't play these games. Gather information constantly in the beginning of a relationship. Learn what somebody's really like. And then if you continue the relationship, you can express a preference. I would prefer if you responded within an hour or half an hour or whatever it is of getting a text. I would be grateful if you would do that. I feel loved when you do that. They may be utterly aware of that. But you have to feel loved enough to be able to say this in a loving way, or the whole conversation is just going to go terribly, as the Brits would say, pear-shaped. New subject. Here's somebody who's writing to me and says, my entire life, I barely even realize that snowboarding exists. This was in a newspaper article, come to think of it. And then the author said, me, 2 days into the Olympics, if McMorris thinks he's going to get on the podium with anything less than a clean 1620 toe grab, he's a fool. I laugh because of the truthfulness of this. We don't care about snowboarding for 4 years, and then the Olympics come up and suddenly we know what a 1620 toe grab is. Why does this happen? Because we all have such an incredible need for meaning, for purpose, for excitement. In the United States, for example, how much genuine patriotism is there where people support and care about their government? Yeah, not a lot. There really isn't. But if we unite in being against something, suddenly we're all very patriotic, which is why during the Olympics, we all get very excited because we win more medals than other countries. I'm convinced, in fact, that the Winter Olympics aren't as exciting to Americans as the Summer Olympics because we don't win as much. Winning means a lot to us. And if our team wins, look at Boston. Look at Chicago. Look at the football and baseball teams in those cities. That Boston recently won the World Series after, 103 years or some such thing. And the city went berserk. Why? Because we have this incredible need for meaning, for purpose, for excitement. So when our team, which is absurd, this is a bunch of incredibly high-paid athletes who came from all over the country, and in fact, sometimes all over the world, and got together, and the team won. They have absolutely nothing to do with the city. They have nothing to do with us, certainly, but suddenly we're really proud of the city. Suddenly, we have meaning because our team, and vicariously, we won. Once we feel loved, unconditionally loved, all that other stuff is just like dessert. It's fun. I really enjoy watching Olympics for, about 10 minutes, because it's really fun to watch some people do these really cool tricks. But after you've seen somebody do a 1620 toe grab, the next one looks exactly like the one before it. And it just goes on and on. These things become fun, but not essential. They become fun, but not fulfilling. We just don't need all that other stuff anymore. New subject. I was talking to a man who was realizing how his entire life had been pain and reactions to pain. That's all, which is true of most of us. I described how people generally live in a rut so deep. I don't know if you've ever done this. If you go off some distance from the interstate, especially in the western United States, you'll find the original wagon trails. And some of them had ruts that were so deep that the axle would sometimes hit the top of the two ruts so that it would bottom out. I said, people generally live in a rut so deep that they can't even see the sky. A rut born of reactions and habits repeated over and over again. He said, "Oh, you're talking about me. I'm in the rut. I'm the one who's been stuck all of my life. All I've done is go along in my wagon and stay in the rut, and I haven't made a single choice." Oh, dear, he said. My response was, no, not, oh, dear. Yes, you're in the rut. It's like being deep in a cave. You can't get out by yourself. The situation is actually potentially deadly, but not, oh, dear, meaning, oh, my goodness, what a disaster. The reaction is, thank goodness, because you've got somebody there, several people, because I happen to know you and the people around you, several people who you can just take their hand and get out. Take my hand. I've been in the rut. I know the way out, or at least a way out. I know other people in your life who know a way out. And between all of us, you can get out of the rut of your life. We tend to look at the depth of the rut. We tend to look at the enormity of our mistakes. We tend to look at how far behind we are instead of, hallelujah, I have a way to completely change my life. A much happier way to live. Here's a father, new subject, Brian, who writes, and he's been practicing real love intermittently for years. His wife is an enormous victim, and together they raised a victim-y daughter, Sylvia. She was raised completely entitled because she learned that if she whined, she got what she wanted. No chores, no responsibilities, got to do whatever she wanted to do. So when she went to college, she got a degree in, wait for it, theater costume design. No kidding. Now, I'm not making fun of the occupation or the degree. In plays on Broadway and in London and elsewhere, somebody does have to design those costumes and put them together. But it turns out that the jobs in that field are very, very few. They're very competitive. They tend to pass from one person to another. They tend not to be taken by somebody who's gone to school and gotten to a degree. They tend to be apprenticed to somebody who's already done the job. And only the most talented and hardworking find these jobs. This girl is neither talented nor hardworking. Nobody advised her about the difficulties of finding a job and making a living. So they said nothing when she picked a nearly worthless degree. So she paid her school how many tens of thousands of dollars to get a degree that is virtually worthless. And I see this a lot. I mentioned this in a recent video chat that 0.6% of girls plan on getting a degree in computer science, despite the fact that such degrees are invaluable in the workplace now. There pretty much doesn't exist a business that doesn't use computers and who couldn't use somebody who had a degree in computer science. And 0.6% of girls are going to graduate with this degree. 0.6%. 6 out of 1,000. And yet we take sociology and history and psychology and underwater basket weaving. And I know one girl who spent $40,000 a year at a private school, and she got a degree in metal welding. Again, I am not making fun of the particular degree, because there are people who become enormously successful in these jobs, but they are very few. It's like a kid who has a good jump shot when he's 12 years old in his driveway, and he decides that he wants to go to the NBA. Oh, that's a real crapshoot. 1 in a million chance that a kid like that will succeed. So as predicted, she finished college 7 months ago. She's been sitting at home doing absolutely nothing during all of that time, playing games, reading television, no job search. Dad has been nagging her, but nothing has worked. I made some suggestions to him. He would sometimes do them, sometimes wouldn't do them, but he was just like her. Intermittently responsible. So I finally said, this is it. I've had it. You can do whatever you want to, but this is the end of my lecturing. This is the end of my helping. You're just playing around. You're begging your daughter to be responsible, and it's not working. You're begging her. Every day you beg her to go out and look for a job. Every day you beg her to go out and contact one of her mentors, one of the people that she did an internship with. Only one thing is going to work with this girl. If that may not work, but only one thing will work. You give her the date when she has to be on her own, moved out. Whether she gets a job is up to her, but she has to be moved out on a particular date. Oh my goodness. He just had a fit. He just couldn't imagine doing such a thing, but he finally did. He gave her a date. And I said, every time she comes and talks to you about how she wants the date to be moved, you simply repeat the date. And he said, well, so in the meantime, then I need to be teaching her how to find a job. No, you don't. You just repeat the date, because you've already tried that before. You've already tried to help her find a job. You've already tried to, in fact, hire a job counselor, and that didn't work. You just give her the date. And predictably, she threw a fit. The girl threw a fit. Her mother joined in and had a fit. And he finally learned to shut his mouth and simply repeat the date. She wrote him a letter, since she can't have a conversation with him without screaming and crying. She said, I know that you'll think I'm being stupid for most of this, and you will probably dismiss it. Notice, huge fear of being wrong. And there's lots more in her letter that I'm not going to read. She's paralyzed by her fear of being stupid and worthless, which is why she finds it nearly impossible to look for a job, because that process, job finding, involves so much rejection. It's part of looking for a job. She's not going to learn to be responsible from your words, only from the date she has to be out by. She may get a job in her field. She may get a job working at McDonald's. Doesn't matter. She's got to get out and get a job. The girl says, I constantly feel exhausted and drained, and like you tell me that I'm being stupid. Blame, blame, blame. So victims will constantly blame you for their condition. We've been having chats, the girl continues, this is a letter to her dad, having chats about my need to get a job, but I just feel trapped. I'm sorry, I'm not the sweet little girl you once had. She really feels terrible about herself. And I feel terrible about it. If she were 4 years old, it would be entirely your job to change. Yours, the parent, the dad, if she were 4. But she's 24. So she has to learn. And over 24 years, you've proven that your words alone are worthless. They don't work. Yes, you need to be more loving, but she can't remain idle for the 10 more years that it would take for you to learn to be loving and how to teach her. And just like her mother, she's the consummate victim with the I feel trapped by events, circumstances, and things. She says, the daughter, I can't be out by the date you said. I have to learn to drive. I have to make these contacts. I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do blah, blah. She went on and on and on with interviews and so on. He didn't, by the way, give her a week to be out. He gave her 2 months. 2 months. And she said, I can't learn to drive in that time. She's been out of school for 7 months. So in 9 months, she's claiming that she can't learn to drive. You know how I learned to drive? My dad went out in the car, and this was with a clutch. This wasn't a standard. And he said, drive. And the first few starts with those of you who have ridden a manual, where there's a manual clutch and not an automatic, it's quite an experience to watch a kid drive the first time. It shakes the brain out of your head. But I learned to drive in 1 evening. 1. If we have to do something, we will. And then I got better and better over time. And so will she. This is a very sneaky kid. She's been home for 7 months. I could teach a monkey to drive in 2 weeks. So clearly, she doesn't want to learn to drive. Then she went on and on about how she had tried to start a business when she got out of school. She and a friend with no business experience. Remember, this is costume design. She and a friend with no business experience or advice consumed 4 of the 7 months and wasted all of their money, because they were looking to create a pie-in-the-sky miracle job that everybody hears about and reads about in magazines. And then she adds, and January isn't a good month to find jobs. You will discover that for this girl, neither is February or March or April or May or every month. Every week of the year is a bad week for her to get a job, as she has proven over the last 9 months. The daughter continues in her letter, this feels like a dictatorship and like you're constantly throwing things at me. And then she went on and on about how nothing was her fault. And if I leave in 2 months, I would have to get another job. So in other words, she's saying to her dad, if I have to leave in 2 months, then I'd have to get more work. Wow. So she'd be the only person on earth with 2 jobs. I worked 2 jobs most of my life. If that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. Her present job is 20 hours per week, which is essentially like being on vacation, really. Half the time she works, half of the normal work hours. And then she said that she didn't want any more advice, even though she's working half time, and is devastated at the idea that she might actually have to have 2 part-time vacation jobs. She said she didn't want any more advice, and then there was lots more excuse making and blaming. So I suggested that he respond to the email in this way. Sylvia, this is the dad talking to his daughter. Much of what you say is right. There will be no more chats, no more nagging. My mistake. I was attempting to help you see that all of life is a series of taking responsibility for our own choices. You chose your major at college. You chose to start a very risky business. You chose to be angry at me instead of grateful for any time here at all in the house, to which you have no entitlement. So there will be no more lectures from me, but it is simply time for you to pay the price for your 24 years of choices, rather than expecting your parents to pay for them. So I'm simply describing what we're willing to pay attention to this, all parents of young adult children. I'm just describing what we're willing to give you. Notice the daughter regards everything that her father has given her as nothing. And anything he doesn't give her, she regards as a punishment and unfair, a total victim stance. So you're going to tell her, I'm telling you what I'm willing to give you. The correct response to this gift, by the way, since I'm teaching you, would be a simple, thank you, Dad. But I don't expect that. I'm just telling you that we're giving you the time and space and resources you need while you're here until 2 months from today. So we're going to help you for 2 months so that you can get on your feet on your own. We could very easily tell you that you have to leave tomorrow, but we're willing to go out of our way and give you 2 months instead, for which you can be grateful and use it or not. It's a gift. It's not a punishment. You're not being thrown out, as you often say, since you had no entitlement to be here in the first place. I will try to simply support what you do between now and then. If you have questions about how to get a job, if you have questions about how to get a driver's license, I will help you. But from now on, I will not nag you. I will not hound you. I will simply remind you of the date that you need to be prepared to be on your own. Love, Dad. That's what I suggest that you say to her. You've raised unintentionally. You didn't mean to. You didn't know any better. Your parents didn't know any better. Your wife didn't know any better. Your wife's parents didn't know any better. They didn't know how to raise a child. And so all of those parents have raised entitled children. It's very common that if we don't know how to love a child, we either ignore them, which devastates them, or we spoil them and enable them, which gives them a sense of entitlement that also destroys them. Anything other than unconditional love, no matter how sweet and cute it looks, will destroy a child. So what you're doing for your child here by giving her 2 months and offering her the opportunity to be instructed or not is a gift, and I commend you for it. Always the question is, what can I do in this particular situation to be more loving? And you're being more loving to your daughter by giving her 2 months and by teaching her what she needs to know before she's on her own. What a gift. No nagging, no anger, just the gift of everything that you have. And I recommend this to everybody, that we see what we give to people as an unconditional gift, that we learn to love people rather than resent them. If we were to do that, if we were to ask the question, what can I do to bring more love into this situation, the entire world would change. It's a guarantee. We'll see you in a week.